You know what? I hold my hands up. I'm definitely one of those dickheads that bangs on in videos or even on stream over on kick.com/Scottejaye about what class and spec does the most damage, what spec's the easiest to play but yields the big results, what classes are going to be stacked because they're going to be such big pumpers, which means it's easier for you to get a raid spot. Well, in many, if not all expansions after TBC, it's actually really relevant, because being able to get all of the raid buffs and all the debuffs is very easy, at which point you then just start stacking all of your big pumpers. In TBC it's a little bit different. Now don't get me wrong, you still will stack the big pumpers, like in vanilla you stack warriors. In TBC you're going to be stacking things like warlocks and hunters. But there really are some unsung heroes in TBC that really are support classes. Sure, you're not labelled as a true support class like the augmentation evoker in retail, but your number one job is to be there to enable others to do better, to do more damage, which, I mean, that basically means you're a support class, right? So in my last video where we was looking at the biggest pumpers according to Warcraft logs during Classic TBC the first time round, we got a good picture of what every class and spec will be doing throughout the expansion. What you would have noticed as the phases go on is things like Ellie Shaman, Shadow Priest and Balance Druid, and even Affliction Warlock to a certain extent, start falling down the charts a little bit, whereas other classes like Combat Rogue and Fury Warrior, they all climb, and of course things like Hunters, Warlocks that I've already mentioned stay extremely relevant and scale extremely well throughout the expansion. But the reason they do is because of those unsung heroes. Just before we carry on, the rested XP guides for TBC should be going live after the weekend, so make sure you click the link in the description and pick yourself one up, because depending on how you choose to level, I know a lot of people are going to dungeon grind like they did in original Classic TBC, like I did part of the way and then just got bored because, you know, 20, 30 hours sat in dungeons. It's a bit of a slog, especially when you can just get to 70 faster questing, and then when you're 70 you can do things like Shattered Halls, Cephec Halls, Shadow Labs, Black Morass, things that you're actually going to need for gear for pre-raid bis that's going to give you rep anyway. I'm definitely not boring myself to sleep this time round in TBC by smashing dungeons. I will be following the blue arrow, so again, links in the description and the pinned comment. Your hybrid classes are not really there to do big damage. In fact, as long as you're there bringing the buffs and having 100% uptime on the buffs that are relevant, no one's even going to look at your damage. Like seriously, no one's going to look at the bottom of the damage meter and see a boomkin there and be like, this guy needs to go. No one's going to care, because what you bring is far more valuable than just your own damage. I suppose first of all, to really understand who the unsung heroes are, you need an understanding of how buffs and debuffs work in TBC, because honestly, it's actually quite convoluted. Now I think the best way for me to really show you this is on the WoW Raid Comp tool. So if you type in wowraidcomp.com/TBC, it will take you exactly to this. So you can start planning out your raid group in advance. Now in 10-man, quite honestly, what you take don't really matter all that much, just because 10-man is significantly easier and you're never really going to be able to cover all of the relevant buffs unless you literally just stack a full melee group, at which point fights where you need range is going to become difficult, and the same goes for if you stack full range. Fights where melee have an easier time are going to be more difficult. So actually in a 10-man you just want a more balanced comp, at which point you would see an Ellie Shaman, maybe an Ellie Shaman and a Boomy together, maybe even a Shadow Priest in there with a mage, a warlock, a hunter. With a 10-man it's just a lot less relevant. In a 25-man it's extremely relevant, because in most cases you're going to see a group that's going to have, let's say, 2 Beast Mastery Hunters. Now these 2 Beast Mastery Hunters are going to need support, so they're now going to need these unsung heroes to actually enable them to do even more damage. The same will go for a Warlock group. If you've got 3 Warlocks in a group and you've got 2 Beast Masteries in the group, now what you're actually looking at is bringing the buffs that are going to enable these to do even more damage. Before we get into exactly what that looks like, what you'll see is there's raid buffs, there's party only buffs, there's debuffs, and then there's reduction debuffs. Now of course the reduction debuffs more revolve around tanking, so the amount of damage your tank's going to take, because you're going to slow their attack speed, you're going to reduce the amount of physical damage they deal, you're going to reduce the chance they've got to hit. Stuff that really, when we're talking about just doing lots of damage, kind of don't matter, but you know, on hard hitting bosses, which if it's all going to be in post nerf, none of this really matters. The main thing is getting more damage for your raid, because honestly damage reduction kind of irrelevant, and you're going to bring classes that bring those damage buffs to the raid, which naturally are going to bring the debuffs as well anyway. So of course raid buffs are going to count to the entire raid, as you would expect, as the debuffs. So the debuffs are going to be on the target, so everybody's going to be benefiting from it. So what group people are in when it comes to raid buffs and debuffs make absolutely no difference at all, as long as you've got one class that can bring this. So let's start with the biggest one for all of your hunters and all of your melee DPS, and that's going to be a Boomy. If you bring a balanced druid, they're going to give 3% hit to all of your melee and ranged DPS. And when I say ranged, I specifically mean hunters. So what this means is you can run 3% under the hit cap when you've got a balanced druid, which means you're then going to be able to get 3% of a more useful stat. Now that is massive when you're thinking about the amount of hunters and melee DPS you're going to have in a 25-man. Not only that, they also bring the 5% spell crit to the party. So straight away you're going to be putting that balanced druid in with your destruction warlocks, because now they're getting the 5% spell crit. Your melee and range are getting their 3% hit. Fairy Fire obviously also reduces armor as well. So you can see just adding that one hybrid DPS being a balanced druid just adds so much to the rest of the raid. Now that's an example of raid buffs and debuffs. Now another example would be a Shadow Priest, and a Shadow Priest is a good one because it doesn't matter how much damage your Shadow Priest does, as long as they're keeping their debuffs up, they give the warlocks a serious amount of damage. Shadow Weaving is going to increase the shadow damage that the target takes by 10%. Misery increases spell damage taken by 5%, so now this is everyone, not just your warlocks really, that are benefiting from the shadow damage. And honestly, the good thing about a Shadow Priest is it can pretty much sit in any group. If you want to put it in with a prop paladin, and let's say maybe even the mages, because they want the mana return from the Shadow Priest, because basically your Shadow Priest is a mana battery for the party, and the people that need the mana are normally a protection paladin that's doing a lot of AoE, your arcane mages that are obviously just pumping with arcane blast, and post-nerf, bosses are going to die pretty quick, so mana might not be an issue, but it will be more of an issue without a Shadow Priest in the group. But really, the Shadow Priest is being taken for all of the extra shadow damage and spell damage that the target's going to take. So the good thing is the Shadow Priest can go in any group where you want some mana return on those people. So healers, mages, prop paladin, those kind of things. So we can just chuck the Shadow Priest down in group 5 for now. Now the Ellie Shaman is one that you're going to want to be putting in with your Destruction Warlocks again, because Totem of Wrath is absolutely insane. It increases spell hit and crit by 3%. Now just having a balanced druid and an Ellie Shaman in the group with your balanced druid and the warlocks, this caster group all of a sudden can also, like the melee and hunters, run 3% less hit than they would ordinarily need. They're also bringing Wrath of Air Totem to the party as well, which is giving more spell damage and healing. And I'm not really focusing on like defensives or things that reduce the damage they do or interrupts or anything like that, because we are purely focusing on what enables the pumpers to do even more damage. So really having an Ellie Shaman in the group with a Warlock so they can run 3% less hit, that alone is worthwhile. That alone is worth having the Ellie Shaman in the group, obviously. The extra spell damage from Wrath of Air is obviously very nice as well. Now here's the thing, when we're talking about Shadow Priest, Ellie Shaman and Balanced Druids, Balanced Druid and Ellie Shaman, more so than Shadow Priest, you could see more than one of in a raid. I think Shadow Priest, you only really need one in a raid. But if you was to run 2 caster groups, so let's say you're running 6 Destruction Warlocks, you would want a Balanced Druid and an Ellie Shaman in both of those groups. So really the more caster groups that you run allows you to take more of the support classes. I mean, you could even take a couple of mages with an Ellie Shaman in the mage group with, let's say, a Shadow Priest in there as well. So the group would look a little bit different, but the arcane mages are getting all the beneficial party buffs that they would need. Now, honestly, in my opinion, Shadow Priest, Balanced Druid and Elemental Shaman are the true unsung heroes. But Enhancement Shaman brings so much to the group, especially your hunter group, which might seem a bit weird, but obviously on the basis most hunters are going to be melee weaving. Enhancement Shamans will totem twist so they can get the benefit of 2 of their air totems at a time, one of which being Wind Fury totem, obviously, and then the other would be Grace of Air. Ret is actually quite a strange one because Ret does significant damage pretty much all the way through the expansion if it's being played right. I mean, that goes without saying, that's the same for every class. So while Ret's going to bring things like the 3% crit debuff on the target, which everybody's going to benefit from, 2% extra damage from Sanctity Aura, and obviously the Beast Mastery Hunters bring 3% damage, which does actually stack with each other as well, but your Ret's not going to be in the group with the Hunters ever. So things like your Warrior, maybe a second Feral, whatever that's in the group with a Ret Paladin is actually going to get the 2% damage buff instead of the 3% from the BM Hunters. So that's actually really nice for whatever group you decide to put your Ret Pally in anyway. But really, they're good enough to take just for damage. They do good damage, reasonable damage all the way through. The buffs they bring is kind of just a bonus, so I wouldn't really call Retribution Paladins an unsung hero because they're always going to hover very middle of the pack, where The real unsung heroes of Balance, Shadow and Ellie are always going to be pretty low down. Well, after the first phase where no one's got any gear, to be fair, Ellie does pretty well, so does Balance Druid, but really they'll drop off pretty hard, pretty fast. I want to mention Affliction Warlock briefly as well, because Affliction is one of those that you're never going to get in one of the groups where you're going to get all the buffs that you want, because you are actually a support spec. The purpose of bringing the Affliction Warlock is to get improved Curse of Elements, and your job will be to maintain Curse of Elements at all times. The good thing is as well for your tanks, I know I weren't really focusing on damage reduction buffs, but it is the only way you can get it, and that's Shadow Embrace, which reduces physical damage caused by 5% on the target. So 5% less physical damage on your tanks, just as part of your standard rotation, is really nice. Now look, I know we could talk about Arms Warrior bringing the 4% physical damage debuff and all of that, but really when we start thinking about some of the classes that do really good damage, like it felt a bit cheeky mentioning Ret Paladin, because as I say, Ret all the way through the expansion, they're fine. They're absolutely fine, real middle of the pack damage dealer. Whereas it can look pretty misleading. You can look at my last video even and see Balance Druid, Ellie Shaman, all of that right down the bottom. Now, if you're a team player, you'll have no problem playing one of those classes or specs because you understand how much it brings to your raid group. If you're all about me, like me, and want to top damage meters, then you would be going something like Arcane Mage early on, Destruction Warlock, Hunter, Fury Warrior, later on as well. So there's times where different specs shine throughout the phase. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you go and check it out. But those classes wouldn't shine half as much without a well-built raid team and those support classes enabling them to do even more damage. So just bear that in mind. So yes, my unsung heroes of TBC throughout the entire expansion, not just phase 1, not just phase 5, the entire thing is Elemental Shaman, Shadow Priest and Balance Druid. Now I hope you enjoyed the video as always. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. Consider joining the channel as a member. See you on the next one.